My name is Susan Sharp. When I got to the University of Oklahoma, Dr. Susan Marcus Mendoza in the Department of Human Relations approached me about doing some research on the impact of incarceration on families of drug offenders, and I told her that I would do it if we could do it as gender differences in the impact of incarceration on families. A state senator and a state representative passed House Bill, or not House Bill, Senate Joint Resolution in 2004 requiring the Oklahoma Commission on Children and Youth to do an annual study on the impact of incarceration on children of women offenders, women in prison, and they recruited me to do the research. So I partnered with them through 2014 doing those studies. And the studies looked at all sorts of things. We looked at the histories of the women, we looked at the laws, we looked at the impact on the children. And so my research came to the attention of some legislators, and then some of those legislators used the information from the research to try to get legislation passed. And most recently, Chris Steele, the former Speaker of the House, used the research to get the state questions 780 and 781 passed in the state to reduce some of the penalties for low-level drug offenses and property offenses. State question 780 wanted to, the population voted on it. It was not something that went through the legislature. So the residents of Oklahoma voted to decrease criminal penalties for low-level property crimes and some other nonviolent crimes in simple drug possession and make them misdemeanors. And 781 was then to take the money saved from not incarcerating those people to put into mental health programs and drug treatment programs and so forth in the communities. One thing is that the majority of the women in prison in the state of Oklahoma would not be in prison in other states. They're low-level property offenders and low-level drug offenders, and in most places, rather than sending them to prison, they would get drug treatment, they would be put on probation, but they wouldn't be sent to prison. So that was an important thing. Another was the relationship between their histories of abuse and their drug use. So the majority of the women, about 2/3 of them, were either physically or sexually abused as children, and then more than 70% of them were in violent relationships as adults. And what that means is they developed mental health issues, depression, anxiety, PTSD, and then they started self-medicating with drugs. So that's probably one of the most important things. And then related to that, their children were being raised in the same kinds of environments, so then we get the intergenerational effect. The effects are not good. You're talking about breaking up families, you're talking about trauma for children when they're often the only adult in the household is suddenly gone and the children get separated from each other. So it ends up leading to mental health issues in the children. It ends up leading to them dropping out of school. Some of them become suicidal. It's very difficult for them to find housing. Most places will not rent to someone who has a felony conviction, and very difficult for them to find work. Most people will not hire them. So those are the primary ways. They get out of prison, they've lost their driver's license. It costs about $700 for them to get it back. They can't find a place to live, they can't find a job, they have all these fines and fees they have to pay, and their families are generally wanting them to take the children back because the families are worn out from taking care of the children while the mother's locked up. So it becomes a very circular thing where they end up giving up. They quit reporting to their parole officer because they don't have the money to pay the fines and fees. They end up relapsing, they end up back in prison. I've always felt passionately about that we need to be treating addiction as an illness rather than as a crime. So I had that belief before I ever came to Oklahoma, and then the more I found out as I did research, the more passionate I became. I had a friend in Austin who was a recovering drug addict who was dying of AIDS, and so Tina's story impacted me a lot, and I more or less made myself a promise I would never do research just to get it published, and that I wanted to do things that would have an effect and help people. A lot of transitions. When I came here, as I said, one of my beliefs was that research just to enhance my career was not something I wanted to do. And I wasn't really sure whether or not I would get tenure with that kind of approach to research. And then I got promoted to associate professor and got tenure, and about 3 or 4 years later, my chair demanded that I go up for full professor. So I went up far sooner than most people do for full professor. And I was the first female full professor in my department ever, which is a really sad thing, very sad thing. And then I got a lot of recognition on campus and nationally for the work I was doing, and realized that I could use my work to be a voice, and I started speaking out in a lot of public forums, and that was a big transition for me because I love the classroom, but I don't like to speak in public at all. I think I found out what I really believed through this work and what was really important to me, and that people were the most important thing to me, that money's nice, you know, it can buy you things, but things are not going to make you happy, and that being of service to other people and doing things to help people expecting nothing in return is the greatest gift that you can ever receive. Power. Power is the ability to enact your will on other people. Personal power can be that you have the ability to influence how people see things. It can be, I don't know, I guess that's how I see it, as the ability to influence other people. I think I have the ability to influence how people see things by giving them facts and letting them reach their own conclusions. Well, I tend to believe in spiritual things, and I think when you really connect with who you are and what you are, and you're not afraid to speak out, and you've got some faith that everything's going to be okay no matter what, that you develop that kind of power. agency is when you really know who you are and you're operating in a way to bring about the things that you believe you need in your life, able to make changes in your own life and the lives of others. I think some of it depends on whether or not they agree with me. Most people generally tend to like me, but those who don't like what I believe and what I stand for tend to be fairly hostile towards me. I've run into a couple of hostile situations in my time in OU. That it really doesn't matter what they think. I had a situation here at the university where an employee at the university decided that I was an evil person because I was acting director of Women and Gender Studies while the director was on sabbatical, and we had an event that a state legislator took exception to because he was sure that our event was there to disrupt his event, which it wasn't. It was Women's History Month, and we had a speaker flown in to talk about why women's history matters, but he was having an anti-abortion event, and because of the label Women in Gender Studies, he believed that we were there simply to cause them problems. And it ended up with the employee here at the university making threats on my life. And I found that the administration at the university was very supportive to me, and I think that was a big surprise to me. I wasn't sure they were going to be, since it became quite controversial in the newspapers and everything for a while. I stand for human rights. I believe every person has worth. I believe that we have a responsibility as a society to help those who are less fortunate than us. I'm a believer in a lot of small things. I think everybody has the power to bring about change, and if a lot of people are bringing about a lot of little changes, it changes everything over time. Well, I'm a believer in activism, but you have to have a thick skin if you want to be an activist. You have to know that you're making yourself something of a target if you're an activist. I believe it's very important that women in this state stand up and speak up for whatever it is that they believe in, and not let people push them down or shut them up, no matter how vicious the things people might say are, to hold your hand up. Well, I just retired, so now I'm involved with a couple of nonprofits that are very involved in helping women, and I still have a lot of contact with Chris Steele and provide him with information. I may eventually do more research. I haven't really decided yet. I don't know if I hope to accomplish it, but I would like to be a small part of seeing our laws change in this state. Like to see us treat low-level offenders with compassion and give them the help they need, help them find good jobs, help them improve their education, get them mental health treatment, get them drug treatment if they need it, rather than locking them up and destroying families.